Good evening. Welcome to Wednesday night Bible study. We have Brian Hall here tonight, and he's just going to be teaching us through the book, and he is part of mission work that we do here, and we're just thankful for him to be able to go and do things like that for us, and we appreciate that. Happy to see all of y'all here. We know that there's others that would like to be here, but for sickness or illness that they're unable to, and they're on our minds, and we just like to welcome you here, and we'll get started. So let's start with a prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this evening that you've given us. We thank you for our health, that we're able to be here. We're just happy that we're able to come together and on midweek and study your word, and we know that it keeps us strong in our faith as we stay in your word. We do ask you to just give us good memory of it as we study and listen to it and apply it to our life, and we're just thankful for you giving it to us. We are thankful especially for your son, for his sacrifice to make all these things that's available to us. We just ask you to be with us tonight, that we can clear our minds of worldly things and just concentrate on your word tonight. And we do thank you for all that's here tonight, and ones that are our brothers and sisters in Christ, and others that are wanting to know more about you. And we just ask you to give us tonight, and may we listen intently. And we do ask you to be with Brian tonight, and we're thankful for his mission work, and thankful for him to be able to take time to come and see us and teach us. And we do ask you to be with him as he travels, and that you keep him safe and be with his family. We know that we have individually, we have people on our mind that's either sick or going to have surgeries or just different things, and we just ask you to be with those people. You know them better than we do, and we're just thankful that we're able to come to you and leave it in your hands. And we do always ask that your will be done. And we do ask you to be with this country that we live in, this area that we call home. We're just thankful for the beauty that we see around us, that you've done for us, and we just ask you to be with this country, that it'll always be of peace and freedom, and may we never take it for granted, but be thankful for it. And we're just asking you to just that your will always be done. And we're just asking all these things in your son's name. Amen.
They got me a chair up here. About a month ago, my leg started hurting, my left leg, and then last night about 4 o'clock, it popped like a shotgun went off. And so I've been looking that up, and people have been saying it's probably my ACL. I don't know. I had surgery on my right knee for the meniscus back in, I think it was November, and I think I've been giving to the other leg too much, and I've been eating too much, as you can tell. Yeah, unfortunately, that looks like me up there. I take up the whole screen. Well, I'm glad that you all are here. Brother Rogers, I think I was down a couple of months ago, and he and his wife have collected, well, their whole life, years and years, decades of material, and they've been giving it to me to send to Guyana. In my background, before I started doing the mission work, was in the printing business. My dad is a preacher, but he also, they own the local newspaper. And so I can copy and so on the things that they have and then send those to Guyana. It's a lot easier to send it than it is to take it with you through the airport. And so even during COVID, I collect things and ship it down. And today I was over at the Carnes congregation in Knoxville, or Carnes actually, a suburb, at the 47th annual, I think, Southeast Institute of Biblical Studies lectureship. Used to be East Tennessee School of Preaching. And because I knew I was going to be here tonight, when I got that material, Brother Rogers asked me to fill in. And then tonight, I'm headed to Alabama, Hamilton, Alabama, to the Maywood Christian Camp. There's a mission retreat going on the next 3 days. And then Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, my father and my son, who's a preacher, I'm not really a preacher, I'm more of a talker, but the three of us are doing a 3-generation meeting in Columbia, Kentucky. I won't be there Friday, but I'll be there Saturday and Sunday. So it's a busy week. I get to see Christians in at least 3 states and people that are missionaries from around the world. So it is wonderful. And then today I saw many, many people from lots of places. And I had intended to bring material on something, and I brought something else. So I'm going to talk about what's in front of me because my brain doesn't work that good. But if you want to turn to Mark chapter 15. By the way, y'all may remember I have come, I think, 2 or 3 times and talked about the work in Guyana, South America. It's a wonderful work. They speak English. It's always warm. The government is friendly to Christians. It's just a really pleasant place to go. And when I go to this mission retreat, I'm around real missionaries that go to bad places that the government mistreats them and they burn Bibles and things like that. And my worst story is I got a really bad blister on my foot once. You know, that's the worst thing that's happened to me in the mission field. And they really, you know, can put their life on the line and things like that. So anyway, I married a local girl from Jackson County, Donna Anderson, Roger and Ruby Anderson's daughter. Some of you may know them. They worshiped at Antioch for years and now at Center Grove. And her brother John Anderson preaches at Zion. And I understand her uncle, Edward Anderson, is holding a meeting there right now. So I'm related to all those folks. But I'm from Kentucky originally. So, Mark chapter 15. Leading up to it, Jesus has been put on trial. Well, let's go back before that. So he's in the garden and he's praying. And what does he pray? Very fervently.
Let this cup pass.
Yeah, I didn't see who said it, but let this cup pass. Okay, I don't know. Do I have to repeat that for the audio so the people at home can hear? Okay. Let this cup pass from me. Let me just ask this question. Do you think Jesus was selfish in asking for that? Was he thinking about himself and his physical things that he was going to have to face? You're kind of like me. You don't want to say yes because it makes him sound weak, but I mean, he was human. He was 100% God and 100% human, and he didn't want to have to go through it. He had seen people that had been crucified, and why would you want to go through that? And so another question I'll ask is, at this point, they've finished the Passover, and Judas is going to go out and do what he's doing. So he's got the 11, the other with him, and he leaves, I guess, 7 of them and takes the other 3 on in further, Peter, James, and John. And so is it okay for Jesus to have closer friends than other friends? Is it okay for us to have, some people that we really like to be around and really connect with, and then you got that crazy uncle that you don't want to talk to maybe so often and things like that. And so it's just some things that we kind of don't think about Jesus too much. He was friends with everybody and loves everybody, but he had favorites too that he liked to be around. And so he had them with him, and of course they fell asleep on him when he was, praying his heart out that this cup passed. But how did he end his prayer? It wasn't a selfish prayer. What did he say at the end of it each time? Thy will be done, okay? He didn't want his will to be done. And so then he's put on trial, and it's a mockery. They had to pay people to bear false witness against him. And so Mark chapter 15, we'll start at verse 33. Now when the 6th hour had come, now to us that is noon. Their day started actually about 6 o'clock in the evening, or apparently when the sunset, or when the first 3 stars appeared. I hadn't known that till I read that recently. And then it, 12 hours, and then it starts again about 6 in the morning. So the 6th hour to us would be noon. And it says there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. So during the time that it should be the brightest, from 12 till 3, it's dark. And we don't know if that was just in that land, just right there around Jerusalem. If it was all of Israel, could have been the whole earth. Of course, half the earth would have been dark anyway. But sometimes we try to limit God. It's like, well, yeah, he made everything and he created the universe, but then he set it in motion and then he probably didn't mess with it any. But he can do whatever he wants. And in Luke, it actually says that the sun's light failed. It stopped shining. And so however he did it, God can change the laws of gravity or thermodynamics or whatever he wants. So the lights went out. There was no sun for 3 hours while Jesus was hanging on the cross. Verse 34, and at the 9th hour, which would be 3 p.m. to us, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, saying, and I may not pronounce this right, but Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. Now, Mark translates this for his audience that doesn't know Aramaic, and it says, my God, why have you forsaken me? And I was surprised to find out when I looked it up that there are still pockets of places in the world that still speak Aramaic a little bit. I thought it was a dead language, but why or how did God forsake Jesus? I'm asking some kind of tough questions that makes this be a little bit uncomfortable. It's like, God the Father and Jesus the Son, and how did he actually forsake him? Do you not usually ask questions or get asked questions? You can throw out any answer.
I don't think he had forsaken him. I think that was the human side of Jesus coming out again.
Okay, she said maybe it's the human side of Jesus thinking that he's going to be forsaken. Well, God could have, as Jesus prayed, stopped the whole event. And so in that sense, he forsook him. He did not give in to the prayer. He didn't give in to the love that he had for his child, for his son, and he let it happen. Thy will be done. And so he could have stopped it very easily, like he stopped the sunlight, but he didn't. And God and Jesus are one. They've always been together, but somehow for a time, they were not going to be in that same relationship. And Jesus did not want to go through that. And so a question that some people ask is, if Jesus and God are eternally together, then how could they have been separated for a while? But that's what we always say, that God and Jesus, were separated while he, died. And I don't know exactly how to answer that. There's other questions too that we can get to heaven without knowing every single little answer. When we get to heaven, then we can ask God, "Now, what did you mean right there when you said that one?" I'm not exactly sure, but whatever the relationship was, it wasn't the same while Jesus was there. Some say it's because he was made to be sin, and God, didn't want to touch the sin. I don't know exactly what it was, but there was some way that Jesus felt abandoned and forsaken and didn't have that same relationship with his Father. In verse 35, some of those who stood by when they heard him say the Aramaic words, said, "Look, he is calling for Elijah." They misunderstood the Eloi, Eli, whatever. Elijah is the Hebrew way of saying it. Elias is the Greek way of saying it, which is my grandson's name. But when you say Elias, most people don't. They're like, "What is that? Where did you get that from?" Like, well, it's in the Bible in certain versions. So in verse 36, someone ran and filled a sponge full of sour wine, or some versions say vinegar, and put it on a reed and offered it for him to drink. And I always thought that was kind of cruel. Vinegar, I like vinegar on fish and some things like that. But actually, it turns out it was a very refreshing drink, more so than water in that hot climate. It can be very hot in Guyana as well, and you can get really thirsty. But sour wine was an inexpensive drink for soldiers and common laborers, and it's mentioned in other places in the Bible, like in Numbers and in Ruth. And so it wasn't really, I used to think that it was a smack in the face, to give him vinegar, but actually it was not such a bad thing. And they go on to say, well, let him alone. Let us see if Elijah will come down and take him down. And so he's been beaten. His back is just shredded from all of the beatings. Now he's still being mocked on the cross, and the abuse continues. And some people were still looking for a sign that if he's the Son of God, then the angels will come down, or he can just fly off that cross or something like that. But a few chapters earlier in Mark, Jesus had said, I'm done with you Jews. Your hearts are hardened, and I'm not going to give you any more signs. Of course, except for the resurrection, which was going to come. So in verse 37, Jesus cried out with a loud voice and breathed his last. And in Mark and Luke, it says, gave up the ghost. But we understand physically, the human part of him died. Sorry, that gets me. Did he deserve it? Is there anybody in the world that's ever not deserved to be punished? I mean, besides a little baby that's never done anything. But he took on sin for the whole world. And make it personal. You know, I can see myself up there, look in the mirror. He did it for you. He did it for your family. And he even said, I forgot now where it is, but the best thing that you can do is to lay down your life for someone else. Well, he did that, not just for his friends, not just for his family, but for the most despicable people that's ever lived, before or now or that will ever live. And he did that. In verse 38, it says, then the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And I have to admit that I have not realized how big that was. You know, I think of a shower curtain or something, or, you know, a fancy, like in a church building. Well, like your curtains here are real nice, you know. But the veil was 55 cubits tall and 16 cubits wide. I mean, so we're talking, you know, maybe you could lay it out on the interior of this auditorium, and then if you stood that up, that's how big this veil is. And it ripped from top to bottom, not from man to God, but from God down to man. What does that imply there? What did that veil cover, or what did it separate in the temple? Yeah, the holies and the holy of holies. It separated those. Who could go in there? The high priest. And very, very few men had ever been in there. And how many times a year did they go? One time a year. And so once a year for a long time. But if it was the same guy that did it for, 6 years or 10 years or whatever, very few people had ever seen that. And it was the Holy of Holies. What was in there? Ark of the Testimony, I think I heard. Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, was in there. It represented God, the presence of God. And so when that curtain ripped, what did that symbolize? No longer the high priest only. It's no longer blood of animals sacrifices, and it wasn't just once a year. It was anybody now could access God. You didn't have to be Jewish. You didn't have to be a high priest or of the tribe of Levi or Aaron's line or anything like that. All of us have access now. And I would just like to see their faces when they saw that, when they went in there and saw that thing ripped open. So in verse 39, when the centurion who stood opposite of him, of Jesus, saw that he cried out like this and breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." Who had said that before, earlier in this book, that you are the Son of God? Who was the first person to confess that? I'm sorry. I'm stumping you. Peter. Yeah, someone said that. Was the first person that said, "You are the Christ. You're the Son of the living God." And so the first part of Mark led up to that confession, and the second part of Mark leads up to the centurion's confession. Now, I don't know that the centurion, grasped the full meaning of that, but why do you think that he came to that conclusion, standing there by the cross, that this guy that was being killed in between common criminals, why was he the Son of God? What would draw him to that conclusion? Maybe several things.
Could be some of the things he heard Jesus say.
Some of the things he heard Jesus say, even on the cross, how he handled death. Or he may have been in the audience when Jesus was on trial and he didn't, defend himself, or when he may have even been in the garden, I don't know, or heard about it when Malchus's ear got cut off by Peter and Jesus put it back on and didn't resist. He could have heard some of his teachings. He could have seen some of the miracles. It's not in Mark, but in other accounts, some of the saints were raised from the dead and walked the streets. Also, in the two other accounts, it mentions an earthquake happened and the splitting of the rocks. And, of course, the 3 hours of darkness. There's so many things that you could point to that this guy could add it up and go, this person is unique. The sun doesn't quit shining for just anybody. I don't know if he knew about the temple veil or not, but he probably was aware of the earthquake and all that, and seeing dead people that were dead alive again, walking. So he came to the conclusion, rightfully so, that Jesus was the Son of God.
With Matthew, chapter 27, verse 54, it states there that the centurion saw the earthquake.
Okay. I have never, I've lived in Kentucky, as I said, and there's been 2 earthquakes in my lifetime, and neither one of them did I feel. I don't know why. But I would like to sometime. My sister lives in Virginia, and they had a bad one there not a few years ago. But I wouldn't want to experience them all the time. But that's something that people talk about, the power of that. Now it shakes the house and liquefies the earth and so on. But it was in conjunction with Jesus on the cross and his death. And so he puts 2 and 2 together, plus, there was probably 6 or 8 things there that I named, that you put all that together, and he's a witness to these miraculous happenings. And he's a hardened centurion. He sees death all the time. And I can't imagine seeing somebody on the cross, but he, I guess, every day saw that. But there was something about this one that was different. In verse 40, I forgot to mention he could have seen some of the miracles. I don't think I said that, but Jesus performed all kinds of miracles that nobody else was doing before. In verse 40, there were also women looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene. What had Jesus done for Mary Magdalene? I had kind of forgotten about it till I read it again. She was afflicted with something, and 7 somethings, actually. 7 demons, and he cast them out. And she, among others, was well known for following Jesus and ministering to his needs, especially in Galilee. But also Mary, the mother of James the Less, in my version, and of Joseph. Is James the Less because he's, I don't know, is he poor? Is he short? Or, like, I have 3 children, and if I say my least one, y'all know what I mean? He's my tallest one, but he's my youngest one. So James the Less is probably just, he's younger, I would say. And Salome, I hear her name pronounced differently. And she is probably the wife of Zebedee, who is, of course, that would make them the parents of James and John. And in verse 41, who also followed him and ministered to him when he was in Galilee. and many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. So at the crucifixion scene, some of the apostles weren't around, but some of the women were that had ministered to Jesus, and they were experiencing all of this, and they were seeing it. And the significance is that they were eyewitnesses to these major significant events, the death and the burial and seeing where he was buried and the resurrection and so on. Who was the first person that Jesus appeared to after he was raised? It's the one he cast the 7 demons out of, Mary Magdalene. So when someone passes away today, Uncle James Paul Anderson was my wife's uncle, and y'all probably knew that he was a funeral director for many, many years. Generally, we wait about 3 days, and I guess that's just for the convenience of the family and embalming and stuff like that. But in the Jewish times, the tradition was to bury someone that same day, pretty much immediately, if they could. You remember Ananias and Sapphira, when they came and lied to the apostles, Peter, through the Holy Spirit, struck Ananias dead, and they buried him before his wife ever even showed up. She didn't even know he was dead. And so at this point, Jesus died about 3 o'clock our time, and at 6 o'clock was going to start Sabbath. What can you not do on Sabbath? Work. Yeah, you're not supposed to work. Well, wrapping a body, burying a body, things like that would be work. And so there wasn't a lot of time, less than 3 hours for that to happen. So in verse 42, now when evening had come, because it was the preparation day, this is Mark again telling people that may not be familiar with the Jewish laws, that it's the day before the Sabbath day. And so you couldn't do any work on the Sabbath. You had to get everything done on the Friday. Well, our day starts at midnight. Their day started at sunset. So it's hard for me to understand that. But Friday was ending about supper time for us. So verse 43, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent council member, who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, coming and taking courage, went into Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. So Joseph of Arimathea, that just means that's where he's from. I'm Brian of Paint Lick, because there's other Brians. Yeah, I don't think I said that, but that's where I live, is Paint Lick, Kentucky, in between Goober's Knob and Possum Kingdom. So yeah, everybody, yeah, but it's real. But Paint Lick actually is a place. It's on the map, and the other ones are just roads. But anyway, so he's from Arimathea. And he was a prominent council member. He was on the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council. And we tend to think that all of those guys were against Jesus. And most of them were, of course. But remember Nicodemus, who came to Jesus by night and was taught by him? And so there was at least a couple of fellas that were on that Jewish ruling council that weren't totally against Jesus, but had learned better from his teachings. So he goes to Pilate. So was Jesus, he was popular with the people because he was performing miracles, and he taught like nobody else taught, but he was basically an enemy of the state. The Jews had gotten the Romans to enact the death penalty, to kill him through crucifixion. They couldn't do it on their own. And so, they went to Pilate, and Pilate said, I can't find anything wrong with him, but go do what you're going to do. And so, for someone on the Sanhedrin to then go and ask for the body of this traitor, this guy who says he was king of the Jews, and he might, maybe overthrow the government or something, was what they were trying to say. And that's how the Jews portrayed it to the Romans. For him to go and ask for his body, that was pretty bold. That was really sticking his neck out there. with his Jewish friends and also with the Roman government. So we need to give him some credit there for that. Apparently he was kind of wealthy as well, because not everybody had their own tomb. And today we have lots of burial places. And in Guyana, a lot of times there's places where the water, when it floods, it runs. And so they build tombs up off of the ground out of concrete like that. Otherwise, the bodies would maybe get washed away. But in this time, they would hew it out of the rock, and they would pay somebody. It would take, hammer and chisel a long time to make a tomb. Sometimes it would just be for one body. Sometimes it would be enough for you and your wife, or maybe you and your children, something like that. So he asked for the body, and there, there's some red tape like there is now. I don't know what red tape actually means. We know what it means, but I don't know where that came from. But when you're dealing with the government, there's always, you can't just show up and something happen immediately. And so he's kind of on the clock, because he has to get this done before the end of Friday, before Saturday starts. And so he gets the body, and it doesn't say here, but Nicodemus prepare the body. He buys, I might be getting ahead of myself. Let's see. Okay, verse 44. Pilate marveled that he, Jesus, was already dead, because some people live for days on the cross. And summoning the centurion, he wanted to talk to the guard to verify that Jesus was actually dead. He asked him if he had been dead for some time. Verse 45. So when he found out from the centurion, he granted the body to Joseph. So he did let Joseph have Jesus' body, but he wanted to make sure that he was dead first, of course. Verse 46, then he, Joseph of Arimathea, bought fine linen, took him down, Jesus down, and wrapped him in the linen. And he laid him in a tomb, some versions say sepulcher, which had been hewn out of the rock, and rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. And that is to keep animals out from getting the body. And it was just a customary practice. Later on, what did they do to that tomb? What did the Romans do? Sealed it, right. I don't know exactly how, what that meant, but somehow they sealed it to where people weren't supposed to get into it. And they posted guards, also Roman guards. And I was never in the military. Has anybody in here served in the military? Thank you if you have. Nobody? Oh, okay. So thank you. You scare me. I mean, you could probably kill me with nine different ways with a pin or something. And Roman guards were like that. They knew how to defend themselves. They knew how to fight. And so you've got this band of people, disciples that are following Jesus. And what are some of the things that people said about the empty tomb? How did it get empty? That, his followers stole it. So his followers, who should have expected Jesus to rise again, because he mentioned it at least 3 times in Mark that he was going to do that in different ways. He was going to rise again on the 3rd day. They weren't expecting it. They were dejected, and they were, beside themselves with grief. And of course, Peter had denied him, and, he was really down about it. And you've got, they're kind of in disarray, and they're not united and banded together. And so they're not going to overthrow these guards and steal the body. It's important to see. I don't think we actually read it yet, but I'll skip to verse 47. And Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, observed where they laid him. Okay? So they saw where Jesus was buried. And this was on Friday night. And then a little over a day and a half later, they come back on Sunday morning. And do you think that they forgot where it was? No, they knew exactly where it was. So some people say, well, they went to the wrong tomb. They messed that up, and it was empty, but Jesus was really buried in some other tomb. They even say that that the Jewish people that hated Jesus had stolen the body for some reason. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because if they were saying Jesus rose from the dead, then all they had to do was produce the body, because they could talk about David, he's still buried. Now, you can't say that about Elijah. How did Elijah go? How did his end come? He just went up, in a chariot of fire, so there was no body there. But all the other leaders, they if they knew where their graves were, they could find them and dig them back up. So the tomb was empty, not because of all of these crazy ideas. They even paid people to say that his followers had stolen them, but it was well guarded. So what have I got? I've got like 10 minutes, don't I? So is this story a tragic story? I mean, somebody was unjustly condemned. I don't know if that's ever happened to anybody in here. Yeah, I haven't had that happen. I mean, every time I've gotten pulled over, I was going too fast. So, or once I think I ran through a stop sign. This is on TV, isn't it? Shh, I didn't say that. No, I have. I've gotten speeding tickets, but it's just a travesty, a tragedy. It's one of the worst things. It's the worst injustice ever. Jesus didn't deserve any of that, and it's sad, and it's a terrible story. But isn't it also the greatest story ever? God can take something that's so bad, and humans, they're dejected, their leader's dead. What are we going to do? I've been following Jesus, and now I don't understand what's going on. And then he appears to Mary Magdalene, and you probably talked about this. Easter was that just last Sunday, I think. When Mary Magdalene and the women went and told the disciples, did they believe them? They weren't expecting it. They should have been, but they weren't. They should have been elated and happy and thrilled, but they didn't believe that he had been risen. But we try to limit God sometimes. He can do anything. And had people been raised from the dead before? There's at least 3 times in the Old Testament. And then just right during this whole event here, there were saints that were raised up. Of course, Lazarus and others. So it wasn't unheard of, especially from the disciples. But somehow they missed all of these things that Jesus was saying. They didn't plug it together. And we do that. I do that. I wasted the first 52 and a half or whatever years of my life not studying very hard. My dad is a walking encyclopedia. If I needed an answer, I'd just ask him. But I didn't study it myself. And so now when I'm doing mission work in Guyana, I'm paying the price for that. Because like these notes, I've got to look at my notes because I can't remember, the book, chapter, and verse and things. But God can take something so tragic and turn it around and make it a huge success story. And if he can do that for Jesus or for Peter, Peter rejected Jesus and was really low about that. If anybody should be happy that Jesus is alive again, it would be him. I would be thrilled, if I had dumped on my best friend and then they got killed and I would never see him again. And then I find out they're alive and then, now I'm understanding what you were saying. I would just be so happy about that. So Peter, he's all over the place. He's very impulsive, but he went from being dejected and down to being the leader who preached the first sermon and so on.
Yeah, I think of Paul also.
Paul, even more so. Oh, he was really bad to the church. And he thought he was doing right, but he, mistreated people and split up families and put them in jail and beat them, and probably was there holding the coats when Stephen was stoned. And, but he saw the light literally on the road to Damascus, and God changed his tune for the better. So it reminds us of the great love that Jesus has for everybody. Not just the tragedy part, but the wonderful, the results of it. And, here's John 15. Jesus declared, "A greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends." But Jesus paid the price for everybody. Have you ever gone to a Quick Mart, and this has only happened to me once, but I got up to the counter and somebody had already paid for my whatever I got, like a sweet tea and a donut or something, and they'd already paid for it. And that just made me feel so good, and I tried to catch the guy and, yell and say thank you, but it just made my day. Well, if that little thing makes your day, what about Jesus dying for your sins? What about the chance to have an eternal home in heaven? That is a gift. Whatever I got at that Quick Mart, I can't even remember. It wasn't worth it, but it was a nice gesture. But what Jesus did is so far beyond that. So I'll try to wrap it up here. In what sense did God forsake Jesus? Well, he just turned his back on the situation and didn't keep him from going through what he knew he was going to have to go through. Would the New Testament or the Old Testament have been fulfilled if any little thing had been left undone? No, everything was completely satisfied by Jesus, and it's just statistically impossible for that to happen. But he did it. He fulfilled all of those. The veil of the temple being torn down shows that it isn't just a high priest. It isn't just somebody special. How many people in here are Jewish? Anybody ever done a Ancestry.com or something? Yeah, I know like 3 people that have Jewish ancestry, and that's it. They're only part Jew. I don't know why I don't know more people than that, but we're all Gentiles. But we are on the same plane with the Jews. They had the special covenant first, but the Old Testament showed that you can't follow it perfectly, and so we need grace. The centurion, we need to be more tender-hearted like him. I mean, he was a tough guy who saw a lot of bad stuff, but he recognized the Roman Empire controlled the whole world, and they did it kind of with an iron fist, and power was what they understood. And Jesus had power. He raised the dead and healed people and so on, had the power of love, but he also showed compassion, and the centurion saw that as well, and that touched him, and he recognized Jesus' greatness. I don't know if you knew this, but women in that time period were really second-class citizens. They weren't even allowed to testify. Their word didn't mean anything in court. And so for the first people to see Jesus alive being women, that's very unusual. It wouldn't even hold up in court. But with God, everybody's important. Men, women, Jew, Greek, Gentile. I think I mentioned that Nicodemus also helped Joseph prepare the body of this, he was considered a traitor to the Romans. So God can bring great good even from bad events. Have any of you had bad events in your life? Health, money, relationships, house burned down, I don't know, just all sorts of things. It can be turned around somehow for good. You can meet people that you wouldn't have met before. If you're having surgery, there's people that's now in your circle that you never had in your circle before, and you can teach them the gospel. You have new opportunities. And in the end, the tragedy can be used for God's glory. Don't put your faith in people. They make really bad judgments. I mean, how bad were the Jews? They just misread everything that Jesus was trying to tell them, even though it was in their own history that they were supposed to know. Don't go with the majority. Is that the bell? That's more of a buzzer, I think, than a bell. My wife would really like that. I was joking earlier that he's going to hit it again, and I have to stop then. And I didn't want to give my wife that idea to hit a buzzer, because I tend to talk too much, as you can tell. So if Christ, who was perfect and sinless and never did anything wrong, suffered for his cause, what about us? I mean, we're going to have to expect that. Once you become a Christian, is everything all peachy? We have a bunch of Mennonites that are moving into our farming area. That's how they plant a new church, apparently. And 10 families are moving in from Pennsylvania and another place in Kentucky. And anyway, the leader, his last name is Peachy. So he said everything's always peachy with him. That's his last name. So anyway, is it hunky-dory and everything's just roses and sunshine when you're a Christian? No. Your attitude should be good no matter what happens. I mean, I get down and gloomy, but we're going to suffer. If Jesus suffered, then we're definitely going to suffer a little bit too. I mentioned about having an open heart like the centurion, and also Joseph and Nicodemus. They gave up the Jewish ways to follow Jesus and was looking for the church to be established. And Jesus is the Son of God, and Peter recognized that, and the centurion recognized it, and the whole world someday, whether they're atheists now or not, they'll bow and recognize that. But the person, the being that created the universe, his Son, died for us, for you and for me. And that very, very bad, unjust event where he died is also the greatest event in the history of the world. And I tend to look at it that way more so. I can put myself in his shoes and go, boy, I've been dumped on and I feel sorry for myself and stuff. But, you know, I want to try to focus on the positive part, that event had to happen to be fulfilled. And Jesus went through it. And like I said, Easter just happened. And so the whole world, well, a lot of the world, the attendance is a little higher at church on Sunday morning. And people show up and think it's a more special day and things like that. But at least if they're thinking about God, you know, talk to them about it. You know, use that opportunity. Maybe it's Christmas or whatever other time that they might show up. Use that opportunity. And so Jesus died, but that wasn't the end of the story. Just a few hours, really, later, was raised from the dead, never to die again, which is different than all those other people that were raised up. Lazarus, is he still walking around? I guess I got to quit. Thank you all very much for listening and for answering my questions and indulging me and for letting me sit on the stool. Did I tell you?